for another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. I'm your host, Ben Domenech. You can email the show at radio@thefederalist.com. Joining me today for the full hour is going to be someone who I think has garnered a lot of attention in recent years for her bold stance on issues of feminism, issues related to video games, and issues that I think are at the center of our conversation about the future of our culture and how the sexes interact. And that's Christina Hoff Sommers, who is a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and the host of the popular weekly video blog, The Factual Feminist. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, lovely to be here.
So I want to start by asking you about something that just happened, and I was asking you to be on the show even before this happened, so it's just good timing, and that's that the other day in Washington, D.C., there was a gathering of people, think tank scholars, journalists, and others, all in support of the various conversation that's emerged in the wake of Gamergate, and you were the guest of honor, or at least a guest of honor there. And there was a bomb threat called in, and having never experienced something like that myself, I have to ask you, what is that like?
Well, it started earlier in the day, and I wasn't just a guest of honor. I organized it with a British journalist, enfant terrible Milo Yiannopoulos. He was in town, and we were constantly tweeting back and forth and writing about the controversies among video game players. And so we decided to have a meetup. And they'd done it in London, and it's a lot of fun. And the people that turn up, the media has depicted these video game players, these passionate, committed players, as toxic, masculine hegemons. And it's these nice people come, and, and a lot of women, and very diverse ethnically and racially and so forth. So we thought, well, this will be great, and, we'll get together. And so we had a lot of people responding because Milo was very organized about it and got a list. And I chose this bar called the Local 16, which a friend of mine had said was great. And it was fine. And a lot of people were coming. Early in the day, the very nervous manager calls me and says, "What's going on? We're at the middle of a Twitter storm, and they're attacking us and saying that it's going to be like male supremacists or something coming." And I tried to calm her down. I said, "No, that's just internet nonsense." And then I made an attempt to explain Gamergate, and then I just gave up.
Yeah,
you can't explain it, even to my mom. I have not been able to explain. So then the manager calls about an hour later, and he says I think it was a Middle East accent. He was very worried, and then finally I thought they were going to tell us not to come. But then he said the most wonderful thing. He said, "I can't tell any group not to come to my bar." He said, "This is America." And he just wanted me to to send out a tweet saying that they are neutral on the battles among gamers and that everyone is welcome at the bar. And I thought that would be the end of it. Well, Arthur Chu, this person who was a Jeopardy phenomenon, and he calls himself a left-wing stormtrooper, and that's what he is. He acts that way, and he became very excited and started to, he was the one that was calling, and then he has a lot of followers on Twitter, and they started to call the bar and try to intimidate them. And anyway, we arrive, and all was well, and it was exactly as I expected, a very diverse, welcoming crowd of exceedingly nice people. And it went wonderful, and Milo Yiannopoulos gave a funny speech, which is on YouTube. And my research assistant, Caroline Kitchens, the deputy factual feminist, she gave a funny toast, and I gave a little talk and told them how relieved I was, because I had last groups I had addressed had been Oberlin College and Georgetown, where people in the audience were triggered by my presence, and they had to have a safe room to flee to in case something panicked them in my words. And so I thanked the crowd for no one apparently being triggered, and they made me feel safe and validated, and so, and it was fun. It was great, and we were lots of selfies and just fun. And then at midnight, I was actually getting tired and sort of going towards the door, and then I noticed everyone was going towards the door. And suddenly, because I hadn't heard anything about why or that there was a bomb scare. As we went down the stairs, someone said that it was a fire drill. And that was sort of hard to believe, that they would have a fire drill in a busy bar at midnight in DuPont Circle. Yeah. Well, not DuPont Circle. It was where we were. Anyway, then we go outside, and there are lots of sort of nervous-looking policemen. And I didn't see it, but apparently there were dogs, they would bring in to sniff out bombs. So it was a bomb scare. I think that's been confirmed by now. And so someone sent in a threatening tweet, I guess.
It really does seem to me to be an indication of how crazy this conversation has gotten when it comes to Gamergate in the context of the things that you've been arguing within that space. What made you decide to speak up about this issue and to try to guide, I think, a lot of people through a very complicated issue, and I think a really superb way with what you've done with the Factual Feminist and your other writings about these topics and other activity about it? What really made you engage with it? When did you first recognize it as being something that was significant and needed to be addressed?
Well, it was almost by accident. I had thought of making a video about the false data about implicating games in violence for years. And I used to believe this. People used to claim that there's evidence that shows that violent video games, or these shooter games, they are going to create super predators, these dangerous young men, and every time there's a school shooting, we have to hear about what games they played in. But I had looked at the data and found that there's just no connection. People can't establish a connection. And there's better research now. And finally, I think it was a very good journal just told people to stop doing the research. It's not going anywhere. Leave them alone. But then the feminists came along, some hardline gender feminists, and said, "Oh, the games are sexist, racist, homophobic," and this was simply not true. There are games you can find. The games are so diverse. You can find anything in a game. And this was the way they implicated the games was through just completely shameless cherry picking. And this made the gamers mad, and so they organized. But I came to it because I'd suddenly seen all of these articles about how the dominant demographic in games are middle-aged women. And I just thought that was strange because I don't know any middle-aged women that play games the way I have known young men to play them, and some not so young men. And so I looked more carefully at the study and found that it was really because there are all these games like Candy Crush and so forth. So if you look at a breakdown, there's a small group, or a subculture of very committed gamers for whom it's a life passion. They do it a lot. They will go to conventions they're doing it online, and it's kind of a wonderful thing, and it's. These games are very difficult.
Yes.
You have to be talented. I think you have to be very smart to go to the higher levels in these games. So I just found them, I found it odd that there was seemed to be in these media stories efforts to pretend these people didn't exist. And then I noticed there were these articles saying gamers are dead. There are no more gamers. Well, they weren't dead. They're just the world of games had was becoming. It was one of the most. It was just a area of the entertainment world that's growing at such a pace. So it's very exciting, but it's attracted these sort of culture critics, I guess, from sociology majors who needed something to do, and they've gone to attack these poor gamers and turn the games into as if it were an Oberlin College, a sensitivity seminar, and the gamers resisted that. So I saw what these critics were doing because I had seen it before. I'd seen these kinds of arguments deployed against scientists and athletes and even comedians, and so I just made a little video about where I thought they went wrong, why this particular feminist critique was unfair. And it turned out to be hugely popular, and I think it's had more than more than 500,000 views. And so there I was at the center of.
So now you have this huge following of video gamers who all care about you and all view you as kind of their philosophical champion in this battle.
I know, and I'm not a gamer. I told them I have played Candy Crush a few times, and I played Pac-Man in the 80s in a bar in Cambridge. But and then I looked at some of the more controversial games, like Call of Duty, and then I saw very many violent scenes in the Anita Sarkeesian videos, which looked terrible to me. And I thought to myself, well, I wouldn't want to play that, but I feel the same way about, The Sopranos. It was too violent. I couldn't watch it. Movies. And there's no evidence that this is making people violent. So I just, I would, as I said in one of the videos, I would prefer games, with gentle themes from Downton Abbey and not Call of Duty. But
it is impressive in the sense that now you're dealing with games that have pretty sophisticated, moral choices that you make along the way. For instance, and Peter Suderman, who's been a guest on the show before, has talked a little bit about that in the sense that they really are more like cinema, in the sense that you're making all these choices along the way in terms of how the story goes, but they can be very moving. There's one game that came out relatively recently called The Last of Us, which is sort of a zombie survival game. It has some violence in it and that kind of thing, but but the story arc in it is very dramatic about this man protecting this young girl, and very sad and sort of moving and that kind of thing. And games can be incredible art within that kind of space. And
And I also think that, first of all, what I would like to see, if we had some good cultural critics who could come in and see just the sheer virtuosity of the designers, the developers, what they have done with these games, what's happened with this technology. It's a thing of beauty. It's become art. And and so creative and so fun. And even a game like Grand Theft Auto, one can disapprove, but it's a parody. It's a satire, and it's brought joy and amusement. Again, not my taste. I don't want to be, running over Hare Krishna.
But I also don't think people, you cherry pick, just like you say, in the sense that in the latest Grand Theft Auto, there's a point where you have to do yoga, in order to advance the plot, and that's just the sort of thing where it's like, that's not the same.
And now in many games, you can choose the avatar, and a lot of gamers have told me, sometimes I choose to be a woman because people are nicer to me, or I'll pretend I'm a woman playing, and I'll choose it. So it's complicated. It's a complicated world, and it's vast, and it's global, and it's so absurd for someone to come in with this didactic little 1970s analysis that this is male hegemony and so forth. And there are lots of young women who play. They tend towards other games, but there's a core group of very cool girls, young women who play just the same games as the guys. They're part of that gamer culture. And I enjoy these people. They've been so maligned by the media. The media has done to Gamergate sort of what Rolling Stone did to that UVA fraternity.
That's a good comparison. So how do you break that cycle? How is that broken? Is it just by more people being willing to kind of stand up to the Arthur Chus of the world?
Yes, I think Arthur Chu did us a lot of good with his chaotic behavior last weekend, because people have to see that they're look, it's an internet hashtag Gamergate. It's not an organized movement. Are there toxic personalities at the periphery? Yes, probably, for sure. But that's true, on the other side that's fighting them. It's sort of like the sharks and the jets. But the media has decided to take the side of, I don't want to say call the radicals the sharks or the jets, because I like both of those. But they're just, the media's on their side, and they've picked the wrong side. The bullies, I feel the bullies are very much the gamers call them the social justice warriors.
Mm-hmm. So given that, do you have any optimism about the ability to sort of beat back against this current wave of kind of insane degrees of exaggeration within the media about these sorts of things?
Well, this is why people wonder, like, how did you get involved with Gamergate? This is why I love these people. Mm-hmm. It's one of the first groups I've seen that when the politically correct, cultural authoritarians came calling, the gamers said no. Mm-hmm. And they said it, in no uncertain terms. And they've resisted. And then they were shamed in the media. Who could withstand that? The New York Times, NPR, and there was a law and order that made them look like ISIS or something. And of course, they're used to it, because if you are a gamer, quite possibly your mom didn't like you playing the games all the time. Your teachers disapproved. Every time there's a school shooting, they start talking about video games. And they used to do this with comic books and probably billiard tables before that. But anything, innovation that young people like, adults would worry about it. So they're used to being attacked. They're not fazed by it. And in a way, the ultra left has awakened this sleeping giant because a lot of these players were not that political.